Here's a diagram of a relatively large river system. Pretty typical pattern. We have sources up into the mountains, or at least higher ground, depending on what part of the world you are, so whether there are actual mountains around for that or not. And so we have our faster flowing streams there getting into lower, flatter ground as we go along. Smaller tributary streams coming together to form our larger river. And then as we reach flatter ground, we tend to have spreading out areas of flooding. Flooding is a normal thing to happen from time to time on any river system. So building too close to the river is not a good idea. There's a reason why those flat areas near it are called floodplains. Rivers will tend to get bends that erode along over time. And then eventually, as we reach the ocean, we get flat areas. Often there's a delta where sand and mud being carried by the stream is deposited as the water slows down. What about our more lentic systems? Water is not moving fast, standing water. In these areas of relatively still water, we have three major types of zones. Littoral zone is near the shore, shallow water. These are areas where plants may be rooted in the bottom and stick up out of the water. Pretty high productivity. Sunlight gets all the way down to the bottom, so you have plenty of plants and algae growing in these places. And of course, plenty of plants and algae, plenty of food for all sorts of other things. Out in open water, away from a shore, if our water body is big enough, we may have what's known as the limnetic zone. This is shallow, so there's enough sunlight to have photosynthesis, but it's only floating plants and algae, not things with roots reaching to the bottom. And that limits it. Only certain types of things can float around. So we have somewhat less productivity out here than in the littoral zone. Also, the littoral zone, again, like our rivers, a significant amount of the nutrients coming in are washing in from the surrounding land. Out in the middle is further from the land. And then if our pond or lake is deep enough, we may have what's known as a profundal zone, deep enough where there's not enough light coming in to have photosynthesis, so you don't get your phytoplankton. And so not only is it less food there, there's less oxygen. This zone may be colder, so denser, not mixing well with the shallow surface part. So stuff that sinks down to there can get trapped there. And so as decay happens, one that uses up oxygen, so helps make it low in oxygen, not as much living there. But the decay releases the minerals and nutrients from the things that sank down to there. Here's an example of a pond. This is typical for, say, somewhat northern US type of pattern. And so we see lots of plants and things growing in our littoral zone. Some things out more in our open water limnetic zone. Not so much down here living in the profundal zone. We do have certain types of freshwater worms that can tolerate that low oxygen setting. Of course, plenty of bacteria, but not much in the way of larger life down there. One thing, the textbook picture sticks a land snail body on the supposed pond snail. This is a common mistake. No, not all snails look like a land snail. Land snails look like land snails, other snails are different. As I briefly mentioned, deep enough lakes and ponds will tend to have a surface area that gets warm from the sunshine in the spring, summer, fall, and then deeper water that stays cold. So with this difference in temperature, you get water not mixing much. This warmer surface water is noticeably less dense, doesn't mix well with the deeper, colder, denser water. But, so summer, warm surface, not mixing much. As we move into the fall, temperatures are getting cooler. Eventually, that surface water gets cool enough that it's not particularly different from what's below. Now we can have mixing. All those nutrients from the dead stuff that sank down and decayed deep, now those are mixed back up into shallower water and once again available for the plankton, the other things living in that limnetic area. Winter, cold enough areas, we get ice freezing over. Okay, not much is going on, it's very still. Wind can't move the water. But come spring, the ice melts. Once again, wind stirring the surface, and we get mixing happening before the top warms up once again, and we get our summer stratification. So this pattern tends to lead to spring and fall blooms in our planktonic algae. And of course, all the zooplankton gobble it up, and the bigger animals gobble up the zooplankton. So here's a diagram version. Summer, we've got distinct layers. You may have noticed this if you've jumped into a lake or pond and didn't feel bad when you stick your toe in, but jump in and brr, it's cold down there at the bottom. Yep, you went through the thermocline. Fall, again, you have mixing as the temperatures become more even top to bottom. Winter, ice. Spring, again with melting ice mixing, gives you this cycle. You even see some of that pattern occurring in parts of the ocean as well, where you have seasonal change like that. Again, all of a sudden those nutrients from decay are back up at the surface. You get blooms in your algae, in your bacteria, things like that. Now, the normal seasonal pattern, things are used to it, able to handle it. But if we dump in more stuff, say we've dumped too much fertilizer on farm fields or lawns around this water body, and the excess is being washed away by the rain and carried into the streams and lakes, or our sewage is not being treated enough, then this extra dose of nutrients leads to a bloom of algae, bacteria. As these die and decay, we use up the oxygen, and those few types of algae took over, so we have low diversity, and then the decay tends to kill off other things still. So not good for the diversity of life in our lakes when we have these extra nutrients. Or even into the ocean, we've got areas referred to as dead zones because of these blooms and associated anoxia leading to lots of things dying off. Wetlands are areas that are underwater or very soggy for much of the year, but you have variation. They may sometimes dry out up and down water areas. A marsh is a wetland where the plants are typically grasses or similar soft, smaller plants. Swamps are wetlands where we have trees that are able to grow in the water. A few other types. We have bottomland forests. These are forests that grow in floodplains, places that when the water level gets high, they get flooded, but are dry land, well, maybe a little on the muddy side, but not underwater for much of the year. In areas across the northern US into Canada, of course, similar areas, northern Europe and Asia, glaciers scraping across the countryside with ice ages, dig holes, gouge out little spots here and there as they travel, and also as they're melting, chunks of ice get buried and then melt. And so you get these small holes, and of course a hole tends to fill in with water. So you get these ponds scattered across areas. That's why Minnesota can claim to be the land of 10,000 lakes, at least when it rains. These kind of referred to as pothole areas. We have bog areas dominated by mosses, small plants typically, and also included in wetlands are areas where there is water, not actually out of the ground, but just below the surface. Just with the shovel, you can easily make a well getting down to the water. Now, of course, there's lots of complaint of identifying, why do you call this a wetland? I don't see the water. Yeah, but if you try building your house there, you'll see the water in your basement. It is not a good place to try to build things. Similarly, okay, here's a nice flat place. Yeah, it's the floodplain. You're going to be in the water when the flood comes. So, yes, having rules saying do not build in these places is a good idea. Also, having natural vegetation in these places is very helpful for limiting how much dirt is washing in the water, helps keep water cleaner, better water quality, important habitat for living things. Protecting these is a good idea. Here's an example of a freshwater swamp, the sort that we might see if you get to eastern part of North Carolina, actually all the way up into Delaware, south around through Florida, and around the Gulf Coast region into Mexico. We have these cypress trees, lots of Spanish moss growing on them. You see the water, looks like lots of duckweed, a little very tiny flowering plant that floats on the water there.